all your methods of prolonging life, a more potent source of happiness than any other. In the book of the Yellow Emperor it is written, "When form becomes active, it produces not form but shadow. When sound becomes active, it produces not sound but echo. When not being becomes active, it does not produce not being but being. Form is something that must come to an end. Heaven and earth, then, have an end, even as we all have an end. But whether the end is complete, we do not know. When there is conglomeration, form comes into being. When there is dispersion, it comes to an end. That is what we mortals mean by beginning and end. But although, for us in a state of conglomeration, this condensation into form constitutes a beginning, and its dispersion an end. From the standpoint of dispersion, it is void and calm that constitute the beginning, and condensation into form the end. Hence, there is perpetual alternation in what constitutes betiming and end, and the underlying truth is that there is neither any beginning nor any end at all. The course of evolution ends where it started, without a beginning. It finishes up where it began, in non-being. That which has life returns again into the lifeless. That which has form returns again into the formless. This, that I call the lifeless, is not the original lifelessness. This, that I call the formless, is not the original formlessness. That which is here termed the lifeless has formerly possessed life, and subsequently passed into the extinction of death, whereas the original lifelessness from the beginning knows neither life nor extinction. We have here again the distinction between the unchanging life-giving principle, Tao, which is itself without life, and the living things themselves, which are in a perpetual flux between life and death. That which has life must by the law of its being come to an end, and the end can no more be avoided than the living creature can help having been born. So that he who hopes to perpetuate his life or to shut out death is deceived as to his destiny. The spiritual element in man is allotted to him by heaven, his corporeal frame by earth. The part that belongs to heaven is ethereal and dispersive. The part that belongs to earth is dense and tending to conglomeration. When the spirit parts from the body, each of these elements resumes its true nature. That is why disembodied spirits are called Gui, which means returning. That is, returning to their true dwelling place, the region of the great void. The Yellow Emperor said, "If my spirit returns through the gates whence it came, and my bones go back to the source from which they sprang, where does the ego continue to exist?" Between his birth and his latter end, man passes through four chief stages: infancy, adolescence, old age, and death. In infancy, the vital force is concentrated, the will is undivided, and the general harmony of the system is perfect. External objects produce no injurious impression, and to the moral nature nothing can be added. In adolescence, the animal passions are wildly exuberant. The heart is filled with rising desires and preoccupations. The man is open to attack by the objects of sense, and thus his moral nature becomes enfeebled. In old age, his desires and preoccupations have lost their keenness, and the bodily frame seeks for repose. External objects no longer hold the first place in his regard. In this state, though not attaining to the perfection of infancy, he is already different from what he was in adolescence. In death, he comes to his rest and returns to the Absolute. Confucius was traveling once over Mount Tai when he caught sight of an aged man roaming in the wilds. He was clothed in a deerskin, girded with a rope, and was singing as he played on a lute. "My friend," said Confucius, "what is it that makes you so happy?" The old man replied, "I have a great deal to make me happy. God created all things, and of all his creations man is the noblest. It has fallen to my lot to be a man. That is my first ground for happiness. Then there is a distinction between male and female, the former being rated more highly than the latter. Therefore, it is better to be a male, and since I am one, I have a second ground for happiness. Furthermore, some are born who never behold the sun or the moon, and who never emerge from their swaddling clothes. But I have already walked the earth for the space of 90 years. That is my third ground for happiness. Poverty is the normal lot of the scholar, death the appointed end for all human beings. Abiding in the normal state, and reaching at last the appointed end, what is there that should make me unhappy?" "What an excellent thing it is," cried Confucius, "to be able to find a source of consolation in oneself!" Tzu-kung was tired of study and confided his feelings to Confucius, saying, "I yearn for rest." Confucius replied, "In life there is no rest. To toil in anxious planning for the future, to slave in bolstering up the bodily frame, these are the businesses of life. Is rest, then, nowhere to be found?" "Oh yes," replied Confucius. "Look at all the graves in the wilds, all the vaults, all the tombs, all the funeral urns, and you may know where rest is to be found." "Great indeed is death," exclaimed Tzu-kung. "It gives rest to the noble-hearted, and causes the base to cower." "You are right," said Confucius. "Men feel the joy of life, but do not realize its bitterness. They feel the weariness of old age, but not its peacefulness. They think of the evils of death, but not of the repose which it confers." Lieh-tzŭ said, "How excellent was the ancients' view of death! Bringing rest to the good and subjection to the wicked. Death is the boundary line of virtue. That is, death abolishes all artificial and temporary distinctions between good and evil, which only hold good in this world of relativity. The ancients spoke of the dead as gueren, men who have returned. But if the dead are men who have returned, the living are men on a journey. Those who are on a journey and think not of returning have cut themselves off from their home. Should any one man cut himself off from his home, he would incur universal reprobation. But all mankind, being homeless, there is none to see the error. Imagine one who leaves his native village, separates himself from all his kith and kin, dissipates his patrimony, and wanders away to the four corners of the earth, never to return. What manner of man is this? The world will surely set him down as a profligate and a vagabond. On the other hand, imagine one who clings to respectability and the things of this life, holds cleverness and capacity in high esteem, builds himself up a reputation, and plays the braggart amongst his fellow men without knowing where